Greetings and welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you could be here. Before we begin, please remember to hit those like and subscribe buttons and maybe consider dropping a comment. Feeding the algorithm demons is a never-ending job. I would like to thank my Tier 4 Patreon subscribers, Russ of the Frozen North and Nusak. Now, on with the story. The Deathworlders, a story by Philip R. Johnson, a.k.a. Hambone, Hambone 3110, and Hambone HFY. Chapter 21, Dragon Dreams, Part 2. The business of lashing down Sanctuary was a serious one. Huge though she was, and alien tech thrusters that required no reaction mass notwithstanding, the realities of power-to-weight ratio still existed, and Sanctuary was designed to pull fierce acceleration even at sublight, relying on her giant core's power to keep the crew happy and healthy even at 20 Gs or more. The result was that she was light for her size. In the high winds expected to come sweeping down the valley over the next few days, she would slide or even be picked up and thrown unless securely anchored. Kirk, Lewis, and Amir were on one side of the ship. Julian, Xiu, and Allison were on the other, firing cables across her hull using a modified kinetic pulse weapon. One person to retrieve and hold the cable's end, one person to crank it taut, and a third to operate a compressed gas gun which fired an anchoring peg into the bedrock, which Kirk had informed them would typically have been operated by a team of 4 armed with a lifter and a heavy stabilizing frame. Julian just carried it, leaning on it heavily to hold back the recoil. Each time it fired, the heavy chunk sound it produced pulsed right through their bodies and produced a donut of airborne dust. Xiu broke the silence after the third anchor was in, and they'd found their rhythm. So, Julian, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Shoot.
I've never heard a surname like Etzicity before.
Julian laughed softly. Not a lot of people have. It's Navajo.
You're Navajo?
Grandpa is, Julian shrugged it off. I'm not. Chunk!
Allison hefted their line launcher, checked that her feet weren't caught in a loop of cable, steadied herself, and fired. The line described a graceful arc over the Sanctuary's back. How does that work? She asked.
Well, Grandpa went to prison for resisting the draft. When he got out, he went on an anti-war protest where he met my grandma, and they settled in Clearwater County, Minnesota. There was a tug on the line, which meant that the other end was attached, so Xiu started to crank on it. Julian grinned. My dad was a bit of an accident, he confided. And, interracial couples in the 70s, white girl and red skin. He waved a hand, dismissing the bigotry of yesteryear. Don't know if those things were a bit more relaxed by the time I came along, but if it was just, well, he's at least half white. There was a call on the radio. Heads up! And a line from the other side came over, bouncing in the dirt a few meters away. Allison retrieved it just as Julian set the gun and fired the next anchor into the rock. Chunk! Grandpa wanted me to learn his people's ways, but Julian shrugged, massaging the shock of the recoil out of his hands. They're his people, I guess. I'm not really Navajo myself. I just don't feel that... He waved his hands. I don't know.
Kinship? Xiu suggested.
Yeah, that's it. The bond's just not there for me.
They'd gone along to some kind of a nation thing at one point, and what had struck Julian hard was that he felt like a white guy, and had largely been treated as one. That had disappointed Gramp Etsy, but it had at least persuaded him to let Julian be Julian. Doesn't that make you feel sad? Xiu asked.
Why should it? Julian asked. Maybe I never went down to New Mexico with the old man to learn the ways of my ancestors or whatever, but we still had a great time. He taught me hunting, camping, fishing. Yeah, I enjoyed it, so I became a park ranger. I used to spend 5 days a week out in the North Country, keeping tabs on the wildlife. Deer, birds, fish, bears, you name it. He shrugged, watching Xiu wind the crank. Guess the Kortai thought I was impressive because they snatched me up gear and all and stuck me on Planet Nightmare.
And your grandfather? Xiu asked.
Still going, Julian smiled fondly. Same old grandpa, with his dungarees and his Robusto premium cigars. Pretty damn strong for an old man, too.
Xiu decided the line was taut enough and plucked it, producing a bass note. Is that all of them?
That's all of them. Just need to head topside and make sure they're on top of the steel plates so they don't cut into the pressure skin and heat dissipators. Care to join me?
Xiu nodded, apparently pleased to be invited. I'm headed inside, Allison said. Kirk wanted the airlock seals tested, and he can't open the hatch himself.
Julian snorted. Fucking Class 5 species, he teased, and grabbed her around the waist for a quick romantic kiss.
When it was done, Xiu was awkwardly looking at anything other than him or Allison. So, how do we get up top? She asked as Allison slipped away and jogged off in the direction of the larboard airlock. Julian just turned and folded his arms, smiling faintly as he stood below the rungs recessed into the side of the ship until she noticed them. Oh. It was an easy climb in Aru's modest gravity, but Julian had never actually been thrilled by heights. Sanctuary was classified as a modestly sized luxury yacht, but that still translated into being 40 meters above the ground at the top, buffeted by the eddies that were bouncing back and forth between the two sandstorms like a puppy unable to choose between two tennis balls. Xiu seemed to be just as uncomfortable with the winds and altitude as he was. Moderate gravity or not, a fall from that height would kill, and when she held out a hand for him to help her balance, he grabbed it without thinking. Her hand was surprisingly hard and roughened from work. Different to Allison's. Allison had plenty of grip strength, but her hands were softer, colder, and her fingers were more slender. Xiu's hand was warm and unconsciously solid. Feminine, but sturdy. He tried not to notice. So, what about your mother's side of the family? She asked, raising her voice to be heard over the air currents, clearly wanting to bolster her own confidence or distract herself with conversation.
Gran was a Ojibwe. She never talked much about my grandfather, 'cause he was, never part of Mom's life. All I know about him is he was Dutch.
How are your parents now?
Dad died of cancer when I was like 6, and Mom left. Grandpa and Grandma raised me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Julian kicked a cable and gave a satisfied grunt when it didn't move.
Do you know where your mom is now?
Yeah. After Dad died, she kind of helped his brother through it, and well, I've got 2 sisters in Holland I've never met, Julian shrugged. She's okay. But by the time she was ready to look after anyone again, I was 13 or so. Seemed easier just to stay with Grandma and Grandpa.
Xiu checked the cable nearest to her. This one looks okay, I think, she guessed. He nodded, trusting her judgment.
What about your folks? He asked her. 5 years is a long time. Think they'll have changed much?
She hesitated, then gave an embarrassed smile and a shrug, flicking wind-wild hair out of her face. Don't know. I hope not.
Julian nodded sympathy, but smiled. I hope not, too, he said. But, word of advice, you should probably brace yourself. Did you read any of her messages yet? She shook her head no.
Only one of them.
Cool. Well, you'll have plenty of time while the sandstorm passes over. There was a lull in the wind, and Xiu cautiously let go of his hand to straighten and look at the scenery. It was, admittedly, spectacular. The river was a malachite road, its forks and junctions winding down from distant brown mesas beneath a turquoise sky. Incredible, she said, taking a step towards it. We could almost be somewhere on Earth, couldn't we? Julian nodded, though he wasn't really listening. He was too busy admiring a completely different view. On autopilot, his mouth agreed with her. We could, yeah. Like Monument Valley. She turned around, and Julian realized where he'd been looking. So did she. He mentally punishing himself. He took in the correct view, this time while Xiu hastily turned her face back towards the landscape. Her ears were bright pink. No, not like... Monument Valley's more red, and there's lots of green. This is more like... Argentina, maybe? More brown and yellow, he said. He checked the last cable, and he cleared his throat. We're as anchored as we're ever going to get, I reckon. You may as well head indoors.
Xiu just nodded without turning around. Floundering for conversation, Julian hit on the first thing that came to mind.
It's my turn to cook tonight. You okay with a good steak?
Xiu turned and gawped at him, blush forgotten. Actual steak? She asked. Like beef?
Yep, and I can't cook anything else worth a damn, but my steaks? Oh, I can cook a steak all right.
Julian found his confidence again and grinned.
I can cook a damn good steak.
Wow, Xiu said. Medium rare, please.
That's how I like my steak too, Julian agreed. Anything else is
An insult to the cow, Xiu finished for him. They beamed at each other for a few seconds before the same thought struck both of them at once, and they lapsed into simultaneous mutual awkwardness. We should,
get off this roof, he finished.
Yeah, before the storm arrives.
Right. Don't want to get blown off.
No, after you.
Julian was right. His steak was amazing.
But the real pleasure hadn't been in eating it, but in watching him make it. It wasn't an eye candy moment. It was a human moment. Julian seemed to turn off some of his defenses in the kitchen, claiming it as his own, putting on some music and spinning around it in a slow but efficient bustle. He didn't clean up after himself as he went, just dumped everything in the sink. It was a messy and male approach to food preparation, but no Gowan would have ever listened to Breaking Benjamin, or nodded in time to the music, or sang along just loud enough for her to hear that he was singing along in a surprisingly good singing voice, punctuated by the sizzle of skillet and the clatter of plates, and singing as he worked on his masterpiece.
Holding on too tight, breathe the breath of life, so I can leave this.
Look, but don't touch, girlfriend.
Xiu jumped. Allison smiled at her.
He's taken, remember? She asked. Xiu remembered to shake her head rather than shimmy it like Ima. That's not it, she said, which was a bit of a lie, but not much of one, so it didn't count. Allison tilted her head. What then? Just humans. You, him, Lewis, Amir, the music, the kitchen, the food. Humans. Earth. Allison made an understanding noise and put her arm around her shoulder. Making you homesick? Actually, no. It makes me feel like when I dreamed of home. She smiled at Allison and wiped away a tear. This is what it felt like? In the kitchen, Julian's playlist changed tracks and took a dizzying detour into Johnny Cash.
Well, he must have thought that it was quite a joke, and it got a lot of laughs from a lot of folks. Seems I had to fight my whole life through.
Allison directed a sly smirk at Julian as he picked up the volume a bit. He's got an eclectic taste in music, doesn't he? Very varied, Xiu agreed, covering her smile. Come on, help a girl set the table. A minute later, Xiu dropped the knives from giggling at the enthusiastic bellow of, "My name is Sue! How do you do?" that drifted out of the kitchen. In the dark and quiet of the night cycle, Sanctuary creaked like a clipper at sea as her shields deflected the pelting sand outside. From without, the view would almost certainly have been spectacular. Force fields tended to react colorfully with airborne particulates, spitting and sparking as the charge built and grounded itself, glowing all the colors of the rainbow, and others besides. Inside, the only hint of the raging outside forces was the occasional whine as the power systems intelligently redirected the power reserves and increased the reactor output to match them, and the odd structural creak as the shield emitters mounted on Sanctuary's outer skin transmitted part of the huge forces they were emitting into the ship's structural components. In theory, those force fields were more than up to the task of keeping Kirk's ship securely in contact with the ground, but the humans always seemed to feel more comfortable with steel than with photons, even though technically a force field was built to duplicate exactly the kind of electrostatic forces that gave steel cables and bulkheads their strength. Still, redundancy didn't hurt, and if it set the paranoid Deathworlders' minds at ease, Ruckaturp didn't really need much sleep next to most species. While humans took a solid 6 to 8 hours a night, and the Governor Egg needed a whole day every 3 or 4 days, Urtuk got by on quick, regular power naps. In fact, the domain's standard unit of time, known as the reek, was derived from the average duration of the Rikaturk trip's sleep phase, though nowadays given a standard definition based on something to do with hydrogen, if Kirk remembered correctly. Not being able to summon random little facts like that at will was one of the few things that he was finding he missed about having cerebral implants. He certainly hadn't noticed any decline in his logical faculties or powers of recall since the removal. Not for the big stuff. Maybe mental mathematics was taking a while longer and he wasn't able to recall trivia, but the important activities seemed to be mostly unhindered. The problem was that the disparity between his sleeping habits and those of his crew left long stretches of the night where the only available company was Vedrig. Kirk and Vedrig may have been old friends, but theirs was a relationship built on mutual esteem and shared goals, rather than actually having much in common as people. Tonight, however, he had something to do, and was glad to be left alone to do it. The less his friends and crewmates knew about some of his plans, the better. By Turk standards, the engineering access conduit which ringed the poles of Sanctuary's reactor was a crawl space, tight and claustrophobic. Vedrig would simply not have been able to fit into it. Humans, Gowans, and Quartai, on the other hand, could have strolled down it, though they would have needed a stepladder to access some of the systems that lined the hemispherical conduit's ceiling. Kirk stooped underneath an environmental duct, stepped fastidiously over a neat bundle of high-capacity data cables, squeezed between two computer racks, and finally found what he was after at the apex of the conduit, immediately in front of the first of his ship's 7 huge sublight thrusters. It was mounted in a little pedestal which doubled as a superconducting power bus of peerless capacity, designed to shunt as much power as the huge reactor could generate straight into the seemingly innocuous little oblong of sealed technology that was the Sanctuary's Quartai black box drive. Without knowing how to open one, tampering with a black box drive was a recipe for it blowing up in the would-be opener's face. And not in a small way either. The Quartai had an unsubtle approach to copyright protection. Kirk, however, knew how to open it. Fabricating the necessary tool had been trivial, in fact. All it did was deliver a permutation of extremely precise electrical currents to 32 of the disk's 3,000 microscopic terminals. That set of possible combinations was already absurdly vast all by itself, but when one factored in the need to deliver excruciatingly precise electrical currents to that correct combination, and the fact that the combination and required currents were changed periodically as a safeguard against simple dissemination of the information, then a value emerged that made the total quantity of subatomic particles in the whole of the visible universe seem utterly trivial. Correctly guessing the combination was effectively impossible. If an enterprising scientist were to fire a neutrino in an entirely random direction and then guess at which specific atom it would eventually hit, then a successful prediction would still be tens of thousands of orders of magnitude more likely than a correct guess at the black box combination. No wonder it had supposedly never been opened by an unauthorized user. With the right key, however, the two sides shot outwards on rails with a snap, and the top hinged open. Kirk reflected wryly that if life in the galaxy had taught him anything by now, it was that working technology simply never had any shiny special effects deep inside them. The occasion demanded a bottled singularity pulsing ominously inside a glass cylinder, or some other such wondrous artifact. Instead, he was looking at a circuit board, much like any other. It was foolish to be disappointed. Nevertheless, it felt something of an anticlimax. The modifications read off on a standard tablet computer were the work of minutes. Connect, load, copy-paste, run. Close the box, remove the key. Back in the comfort of his quarters, he settled onto the bed, folding his legs underneath him, and bade the room load a text chat interface and connect via the newly established protocol under his name.
System notification. User unknown has joined the error undefined exception. Welcome, user unknown.
25. This is getting ridiculous. That's the second one this cycle. 7.
Working on it.
34.
But without apparent progress.
7.
By all means, you're welcome to volunteer for debugging software that has existed longer than you have. For now, I'll just kick this spurious user again.
System error. Error. Redirecting subnet mask. Unknown. Port. Unknown. System notification.
Welcome to the Cabal.
Unknown.
By working on it, I hope you mean that you draw closer to a solution that will allow our meat space guests to connect directly to the Cabal. Every time one of them logs into the primary relay is a potential security failure.
Unknown.
So long as 7 remains in charge of it.
Unknown.
I know for a fact that 50 is working on the problems themselves.
Unknown.
Shouldn't we be welcoming our guest?
Unknown.
You're right. Please forgive us. Jim.
Kirk snorted, amused. Self.
Think nothing of it. I don't wish to be a liability.
Unknown.
In which case, the fewer the occasions on which you connect to this channel, the better. At least until we can complete the task of securing it.
Self.
That seems reasonable. Please brief me.
He sat back and let the explanations roll in. School is exactly as Xiu remembers it, but isn't she a little old to be back in school? No, of course not. She's 16. She must be 16 because if she's not 16, then she wouldn't be in school. QED. There aren't many people around, though. They must all be in class. She'd better hurry. Xiu's locker is number 99. She remembers that fact quite proudly. Top row, second from the right, in the long corridor near the changing rooms. She doesn't remember walking to it, but there it is. She opens it and grabs her bag. It bites her. Sharp teeth. So many teeth. Too many. She flails and beats the hunter around the head with her free hand, trying to escape. It emerges from the locker like a foul magic trick, like a blasphemous birth, but she manages to get her hand free and run. Why is she running? Stupid question. This is a hunter. It wants to eat her. But she's killed dozens of hunters, hasn't she? Still she runs, though. Running, 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 feet pounding the tiles, her hair streaming out behind her. Except she isn't scared. This isn't a chase. This is just her morning jog. She isn't at school anymore. She's running along the waterfront in Stanley Park, enjoying the cool breeze. There's a sculpture of a man sitting on the rock in the water. He looks familiar somehow. He winks at her and tosses her a shiny object, which she catches. It's a metal ball, about the size of an apple. Somehow, looking at it, she knows that the world is going to end, but that she can stop it from happening if she just... She realized that she was dreaming and woke up. Morning was a concept that Kortai, Gowans, and humans held in common, and which had become enshrined, thanks to the Kortai, in interstellar timekeeping. It had created a fortunate rhythm to the day that Xiu had been able to exploit, and she had grown into an early-to-bed, early-to-rise routine that was totally at odds with the nocturnal Vancouver nightlife of 5 years ago, and was more in line with something her mother would have approved of. She was up well before everybody else. Amir, it seemed, was an early riser too. He was just getting up from his prayer mat as she emerged from the gym into the common area. 5 times a day, huh? He paused in tidying the prayer mat away. Is that a problem? He asked, proving that getting up early didn't automatically make you a morning person. No, just making conversation. Amir softened and nodded, pinching his nose. Sorry, he apologized. I'm too used to Lewis bickering with me over it, and he's up early today for some reason. Bickering? Amir nodded. He keeps trying to deconvert me. It's obnoxious. Oh. He puffed a little laugh out of his nose. Let me guess. You think this is strange? He gestured at the prayer mat. I don't want to argue with you. We only just met, Xiu protested. Seriously, though. She hesitated. I'd kind of forgotten that prayer is even a thing, she admitted. He scoffed. Right, the galaxy full of atheists strikes again. Are you always this grouchy in the morning? Amir blinked, while Xiu folded her arms and channeled Mama Yolna, waiting for the verbal slap upside his head to do the job. Okay, he said finally, you're right. Sorry, Lewis just... Never mind, I shouldn't take it out on you. No, Xiu agreed, but smiled. But it's okay. Galaxy full of atheists? That's just Lewis's new argument. Amir dismissed it. If nothing else out there believes in God, blah, 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 you get the picture. Doesn't that make you wonder, though? Xiu asked. Nope. Why should it? Look at all the gifts we have. We're faster, stronger, smarter, tougher, more creative. He turned to her. Seriously, what's Gowan pop culture like? Pop culture? Yeah, do they have sports teams, rock stars, reality TV? How about just commercial radio? Is there a Gowan Bansky or Coca-Cola? What about their phones? What's their version of iPhone versus Android? Do they have somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger, or who's the Gowan answer to Imran Khan? I don't... Who? Amir wound down a little. He's a cricketer, a famous one, from Pakistan, he explained. Xiu thought about it. They must have most of that, she said, though admittedly she had never really absorbed much of it. Perhaps the part of Gowan pop culture she was most familiar with was an edutainment show for little cubs called Yenni Wo, which was more or less the Gowan equivalent of Sesame Street minus the puppets. She learned half her Gowan from watching that show with Myun and the cubs, though apparently it had left her with a childlike way of speaking for some time. Well, they're doing better than most of the aliens then, Amir remarked, but I bet it's not as rich as ours or as varied. If you say so, Xiu said neutrally, too offended to argue with him. That's my point, though, Amir continued. Look at all the gifts we have, all the advantages, all the blessings. To me, it's obvious. Xiu was rescued from having to come up with a response to that by Lewis sticking his head through the hatch, looking frazzled and sleep-deprived. Hey, Xiu, you want to give me a hand? Sure, she sprang to her feet, gave Amir a little wave and smile, and joined them. What's up? Well, I could do with some more exercise advice, but I was mostly just rescuing you, Lewis whispered, once certain Amir was out of earshot. Don't get him started on that shit, seriously. He was okay, she said earnestly. He's just passionate. Trust me, if you give him a chance, he'll go way past passionate into downright fucking intense. The lady doth protest too much, methinks, right? Xiu glanced back towards the common area. Amir had sat down, and from his expression was plainly pissed off at himself. Maybe, she agreed, and, wow, you quoted that correctly. Hey, I'm not here to be the ship's mascot, Lewis smirked. No false modesty. I'm like one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. I know Hamlet. Not really my scene, but I still know it. Xiu blushed a little. Sorry, I didn't mean to imply it's cool. Where I went to school, pretending to be dumb was a survival strategy, Lewis reassured her. But yeah, it's been a touchy subject for him this past week or so. Used to be it never came up, but now he gets all sharp real easy. Don't know if that means he's getting more devout or if he's having a crisis, but it's best to just, avoid the subject entirely. They reached the flight deck where Lewis's usual nest was a riot of articles, videos, and blogs on Taiji. You have internet? Xiu exclaimed. We've got, a backup copy of part of the internet, Lewis said. Godzilla bytes of it. Pretty cool, even if it's a couple of months out of date. But you're researching what we did yesterday? Yeah, Lewis said, dropping into his chair. I actually enjoyed myself, which is a major first for me. I'm glad, Xiu replied. I have a good teacher, Lewis told her, and grinned when she smiled at the compliment. I got up early to try and join you in the gym, but then... He waved a hand at one of the screens. Looks like something came up overnight. Xiu looked at what it indicated, seeing only incomprehensible numbers and text. What did?
Not sure, TBH.
he said, actually pronouncing the abbreviation letter by letter. He turned to that display and dragged it onto the big screen front and center.
I've got all kinds of monitor programs and bots installed in Sanctuary. This one logs power draw on the FDL.
He poked a finger at the screen, which flashed blue where his digit passed through the hologram.
I won't bore you with the, Starfleet technobabble here, but TLDR, those numbers are the wrong numbers.
Wrong how?
Couple hours of sporadic power draw, starting in the middle of the night. Not big draw, but we're landed and powered down. The FTL shouldn't be drawing a dang thing.
Shouldn't we go check it or something?
No point. I've got the full diagnostic right here, he waved at the screen. Piece of shit alien engineering doesn't log half of what it should, though. My bots log everything, but the modules themselves? He shrugged. All I know is there's nothing actually wrong with it. It was just drawing power at ODark 30 last night when it shouldn't.
Still.
Yeah, maybe if it keeps happening, I guess. It could be the sandstorm for all I know, though.
He dismissed the program.
I'll keep an eye on it. I should probably go do that exercise while I'm still fired up for it.
Give it a bit. I need to go shower, then I'm making pancakes for breakfast. Lewis perked up and imitated Homer Simpson.
Pancakes.
She giggled. I'll give you a lesson afterward if you want. Lewis looked like he'd been given an early birthday present.
Sounds good, he agreed. See you at breakfast.
See you at breakfast. She smiled and left him, pleased with herself for navigating a whole conversation in English with human body language and no screw-ups. Today was definitely off to a good start. The sandstorm took nearly a week to clear. They had been, for Lewis, 6 very pleasant days. There was still the unsolved mystery of the power draw on the FTL, but that had only happened once, and came in distant second place to spending time with Xiu. Julian, however, had developed the annoying habit of warning him off.
Bad idea, he was saying for the 3rd time that conversation. Seriously.
You said yourself you'd like her to stay on this ship and help out, dude, Lewis pointed out.
I would, Julian agreed, but she wants to go home.
So maybe if she's got somebody here, she'll...
What, you want to make her change her mind? Julian snorted.
Everyone does that to everyone, bro. That's what a fucking conversation is.
Julian paused, tried to formulate a retort, then aborted the attempt with a shake of his head.
Whatever. It's still a bad idea.
Lewis choked out an exasperated noise.
Why?
He asked.
Damaged goods. Xiu's been without healthy human contact for 5 years, man.
Great. Healthy human contact's what she needs then, right?
Healthy human contact, yes.
Asking her out is healthy, dude. Good for the self-esteem.
Whose? Yours or hers? Julian asked pointedly.
Lewis folded his arms and frowned at him.
What? Hers. Both. It's human contact, dude. I thought you said she needed that.
Yeah, but...
Julian flapped a hand as he hunted for the best way to phrase his thoughts.
Drip-fed. Gradually. You don't throw a hypothermia patient straight into one of those really hot Russian saunas.
Dude, it's not like being asked on a date is fucking hard mode. She says yes, it's just going to be movie night and dinner anyways. That's about all you can do on this ship. She says no? Cool. I can handle being turned down.
Lewis, I spent 6 years alone. I know what I'm...
You didn't,
Lewis interrupted him.
She had the Gowans and the aliens.
They don't count. Lewis looked offended.
Aliens don't count. Kirk, of all people, doesn't count, huh?
Julian stood his ground. I like Kirk. I respect him. I followed him through a lot. But he's not human, Lewis. Alien company's nice, but humans need humans, and it takes a while to adjust when you've gone without for so long.
She's adjusted to Allison just fine.
Allison's a woman.
Sexist, dude.
No, listen. Julian was getting irritated now. She spent those years with Gowans, and you've seen her. A lot of times she slips back into their language, their expressions and mannerisms. She's gone native, man, and given what I know of Gowan society, that'll have primed her to connect better with women than with men. Guys.
Sounds like a fucking good reason to give her some human contact then, Lewis protested, his own hackles rising.
Normal contact, slowly. Guys.
Being asked out is normal.
Guys!
Lewis's arms paused mid-outraged flail, and both of them turned to Amir, who had turned in his chair to break up the argument. Lewis, listen to the man. Julian, stop being so jealous about Xiu, he said.
Julian swayed as if he'd been punched. Jealous? He asked.
Okay, maybe that was the wrong choice of...
Amir began, but was interrupted.
Yeah, jealous, overprotective, acting like you think you've got a right to choose for her, Lewis stabbed. And you look at her pretty much the same way you do Allison, dude.
Amir pinched his nose.
Lewis.
Julian gaped at him. What? No, I don't.
Leave some women for the rest of us.
Leave some? How fucking medieval are you? Julian stabbed back.
Julian. You're the one who thinks he's got a shot at a fucking harem, dude.
Julian's fist bunched and his tone got dangerous rather than outraged. You want to watch... Guys!
Julian and Lewis paused. The moment of tension rang like a dropped knife, and then Julian's hand uncoiled and his shoulders dropped as he exhaled.
Sorry, Lewis, he said. That was...
Yeah, that wasn't cool of me either, dude. I'm sorry.
The two men cooled off in silence for an awkward minute until Lewis added,
But you do stare at her, dude.
Julian glanced down the bridge access corridor to make sure Allison wasn't somehow there to overhear him, then nodded sheepishly. She's got a shared experience with me, you know? We've both been alone for a long time, and it's nice to have somebody around here who really knows what that's like.
In fairness, we all look at her. She's bloody gorgeous, Amir pointed out.
Right, Julian nodded curtly. And don't think I didn't notice where you two check out Allison either.
Oh, come on, dude, Lewis said. There's a difference between that and being a horn dog. You don't just check her out, you'll full-blown stare, and it's not fair on your girlfriend.
Okay, Julian put up his hands defensively. Just...
Nobody's in control of their lust, Lewis, Amir opined. Not really.
Do you mind not calling it lust? Julian asked, irritated. That makes it sound like...
That's what it is, though. Infatuation, if you prefer. And Lewis is right. It's not fair on either of them.
It's not exactly fucking fair on me, Julian objected. I'm not doing this deliberately.
She stares at him too, Lewis, Amir pointed out. What? No, she doesn't, Lewis objected. Oh, face it, she does, Amir asserted. And why not? He's a specimen. But she's spending time with you.
Julian scowled, but Lewis just looked pleased and smiled, giving him a defiant stare.
Oh yeah, so she is, he agreed.
Guess she's just settling for second best, Julian growled.
What?
Lewis's arrogant grin evaporated.
Fuck you!
Get in line.
Okay, what's wrong with you two? Amir stood up and stepped between them. This isn't like either of you. What's going on?
Just sorting out the fucking pecking order, Julian snarled.
All right, piss off my flight deck and don't come back until you've got your head out of your ass.
Julian rounded on him, but Amir stood his ground.
Go! Cool off. We'll sort this out later, he repeated.
Julian looked like he wanted to argue, but just made an angered sound, spun and vanished, his angry stride all but denting the deck as he went.
And you, Amir rounded on Lewis. You've been insufferable these last few days. You've been picking fights with me, with Julian. What's going on? Maybe I just... Lewis began, then shook his head. Never mind. I'll be in my cabin.
When they were both gone, Amir sat and wiped off his forehead, willing his heart to stop pounding and forget the flash of violence that had risen in Julian's expression for just a second. It had been like staring down a dragon's throat and seeing it glow. He hit a button.
Hey, Kirk, there's been a bit of a row up here. We should probably talk about it. Jesus Christ, Cicely, that bag cheat on your sister or something? Julian laughed a little bitter laugh and kept pounding on it.
Just working out some frustrations, he rumbled.
After what we did last night, I'm amazed you have any, Allison purred, then wilted a little when this didn't seem to amuse him. Okay, what's up?
Julian stopped for a second. I don't know, nothing. He punched the bag so hard that it rattled the ceiling beam.
Right. Do you, want me to leave you alone until you, say, turn 18?
He didn't stop. Yep.
Wow, okay.
She turned around and was halfway out of the room when his apology exploded out of him. I'm sorry. She turned back and arched an eyebrow at him.
Yeah?
He unwound the tape on his hands and let them slither to the floor. I'm sorry, he repeated, not looking at her. She crossed the floor, slid her arms around his hips, then angled a kiss up to his face.
Baby, what's wrong?
Got into a shouting match with Lewis.
Really? Wow. Don't you usually get on okay with him?
Usually, yeah, he agreed, still not making eye contact. She put her head on one side, trying to catch his gaze.
So, what was the argument about?
Xiu. He, wants to take her out.
Allison considered this. Okay, I mean, I can't see that ending in her saying yes, but he's a grown-ass man. I'm sure he'll cope, and it might be good for her confidence. Why argue?
He might hurt her.
She made an incredulous noise. Are we talking about the same girl here? She asked. Because I seem to recall the last man who tried to hurt her. She whooped his ass and threw him out of the airlock, so, why argue? She can take care of herself.
Julian wriggled out of her grip and picked up the hand tape. I don't know, he said, beginning to wind it back up.
You don't? You got into a shouting match with the guy, and you don't know why?
Yeah. She blinked at him, then stepped back.
Why are you lying to me, Julian?
He took a deep breath and released it as a complex sighing sound, full of noises that could have been attempts at starting a sentence.
Well, come on, give me real.
I was mad at him over Xiu.
Mad why? What are... Suspicion sniped her right in the forehead and her jaw dropped. Julian? What? Are you fucking jealous?
The way he flinched and turned in on himself a bit more confirmed it.
You are? What, you thought you could buy one, get one free? You pig!
It's not like that.
Oh? What is it like then?
What it's like is that I'm down here beating the crap out of this thing, he pointed at the bag, because I'm super fucking angry at myself. He finally made eye contact.
As well you fucking should be, she retorted.
Well, I am.
Good.
I'm sorry.
You're forgiven. The paradox posed by her still angry tone versus her words shut him up long enough for the echoes caused by the gym's hollow acoustics to die.
I am? He asked cautiously.
Allison coughed out a little breathy laugh and shook her head at the floor. You are, she said.
You're not mad?
Oh, I'm fucking mad all right, she informed him, jabbing a finger into his chest. You lied to me, Julian. You tried to shut me out. That part pisses me off. Whatever's going on in your head about you, I can forgive that.
You can?
Sure. See, you got mad at yourself and came down here to work it out, and you feel guilty about it. So yeah, fine. I forgive you. Heck, I don't blame you. I'm kind of fascinated by her myself, and I'm not usually into girls. She jabbed him in the chest again. But don't ever lie to me like that again.
Yes, ma'am.
A sly smile spread across her face, and she looked him up and down. Ma'am?
He scratched the back of his head. Well, I mean, yeah, that's what I said.
That's kind of hot, she mused, teasing him. I could get used to that. He rubbed the bridge of his nose with his thumb, awkwardly, and looked away a little bit.
Well, I mean, I wasn't really aiming for hot, but, if you want more of that, then, she arched an eyebrow at him.
Good boy. She watched his expression carefully, noticed the way his breathing changed, and the wariness in his eyes. You like being called a good boy at City? She asked.
He swallowed and nodded. Maybe a bit, he confessed.
She ran a finger up him from belt buckle to chin, which seemed to paralyze him. Interesting. She pondered, then looked up into his face. Could be you've got a bit of a sub-streak there. Want to explore it? She asked.
He licked his lips nervously. You think... I've never...
Me either, she confessed. But the question stands. Want to explore it?
Yes, ma'am.
She grinned and rewarded him with a kiss. Good boy. Curiosity and mild alarm were dancing on Vedric's body as he considered what they had just heard.
That kind of argument seems out of character, he commented. For both of them, Kirk agreed.
Just a little, Amir added dryly. Julian's scary when he gets angry too, and Lewis just kept antagonizing him. It was like watching a chicken try and pick a fight with a bear.
And all this over Miss Chang.
Vedric lapsed into contemplation, slow bands of blue light rippling all over his body.
Ready for your thoughts? Kirk asked him after a moment. Increased aggression, competition over females. If they were Vagork, I would think they were entering Must. Lewis has started taking his exercise seriously this last week too, Kirk mused. Interesting theory.
For the Earthlings' benefit, please. Both aliens made apologetic gestures to Amir.
Vagork males of high rank periodically enter a state called Must, where their testosterone levels soar and they become violent, aggressive, and, amorous, Vedric explained. Testosterone has a similar effect on humans, even though you don't have Must, Kirk added.
Okay, well, what about me and the girls? We don't feel any different, Amir paused. At least, I don't. And I think we'd notice if you and Allison were both acting like Julian and Lewis.
So that rules out any environmental factors, Kirk said, meaning this must have been triggered by a specific event.
Well, Lewis has always been... He's always rolled his eyes a bit over my faith, but it started to get worse just after we left where we picked up Xiu.
So it's an event within the past week. Perhaps. None of the other humans have studied it.
Yeah, but you studied it too, didn't you?
I'm not human. I'm not sure my body even produces testosterone. But even a week on, I can still feel cravings to study that thing again. You are not going to suggest that we should get it out and examine it further, are you? Vedric asked. Don't tempt me, Kirk replied. No, I think a simple trip to the infirmary for them both may be in order. If they are both experiencing a hormone spike, as seems likely, then it's easily corrected.
I'll call them. Xiu's cabin was actually the most lavishly decorated on the ship, despite her initial reluctance to put her stamp on it. Allison had pointed out that Xiu was going to spend at least like a month on this ship anyways, so why not get comfortable? The result was that she'd used up her entire month's allowance of nanofactory time on fabrics, rugs, fairy lights, throw pillows, and, with Kirk's permission, candles. The result was that the cool default lighting of the cabins was warmer in her room, and there was a gust of scented candle on the wind when she answered Lewis's knock. "Hey," she smiled, but he could tell that she was pretty frazzled. "What's up?" I can come back if this isn't a good time." "No, I'm fine. She yawned. "I didn't sleep so well last night, and I guess it's catching up on me now." "Well, if you need a nap," she smiled. "I'm fine, really. What's up?" "Well," he took the plunge. "Look, there's not a whole lot to do on this ship, I know, but I've got some movies picked out I think you'd like, and I'm not a half-bad cook myself when I put my mind to it, so I thought, well, we've been getting on pretty good, and..." Her lips parted in surprise. Are you asking me on a date?" she asked. "Yeah, or on the closest thing we can manage to a date on this ship, if you want." "Wow, Lewis knew a rejection when he saw one coming and steeled himself for it, determined not to be disappointed. "I mean, I'm flattered, but, Lewis, I'm not ready to mate with anyone yet." All the steeling in the world couldn't have protected his ego from that unexpected turn of phrase. "Mate?" She hadn't seemed to notice what she'd said until his outraged echo, but when she did, her face went crimson. "Oh, God, I'm sorry, that was in Gowan. No, clearly I had the wrong idea here." "Don't be angry, go mate with yourself, Xiu." "But..." He was already halfway down the corridor and pretended not to notice the sound of her door closing, nor the miserable shout of, "God fucking damn it, Xiu!" that drifted through it. He barged past Vedrick on his way to his own quarters, ignoring the big alien's concerned query, and threw himself into his bunk, fuming quietly. The worst part was that he didn't know why he was so angry. The anger felt wrong, forced. He knew he shouldn't be so mad, and that just made him madder. He was still seething when the room chimed politely at him. "You have a message," it informed him. "Ignore." "The message is flagged as urgent." "I said fucking ignore." "Ignoring message." "And hold all my messages until I say otherwise." The room chimed again, acknowledging the command, then fell silent. He didn't notice when he fell asleep, but he woke with a start sometime later when somebody started banging on his door. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been The Deathworlders, Chapter 21, Part 2. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you did, please consider smashing those like and subscribe buttons and maybe dropping a comment down below. And while you're at it, maybe consider going over and checking me out over on Patreon. Cool stuff happening over there, and more to come. As always, a huge shout out to my editor, Gregor. Thank you very much, buddy. I could not do this without you. Okay. As I record this, it's my birthday, December 21st. Happy birthday to me. This will air a couple of days after Christmas. However, due to both the Christmas holiday and work issues, I'll not be able to record at all for the next week. So there'll be about a week or 2 weeks break in posts. I'll be back as soon as I can. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. Hell, this story's just getting started. Okay. Question, who's got the question? Okay, here's a hard one. What is your favorite kind of cake? Leave your answers in the comments section below. Until next time, be well, be safe. I love you all, and Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.